have to give to you this morning for about 20 minutes is a background about Snowmass, the Snowmass Interreligious Council when it started, and later became the Snowmass Interspiritual Dialogue, known as SISD. I find it a little ironic that I'm the one standing here telling you about Snowmass when I wasn't originally invited to be a part of Snowmass. And what I mean by that is that when Father Thomas Keating decided to bring about representation from the major traditions of the world to hopefully enter into dialogue to find points of agreement, I came in through the back door. And the way that happened was that he heard about my uncle, Gerald Redell, who was up on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, and at that time when he was alive was a Sioux holy man, shaman, medicine man. And when Father Thomas Keating called me to invite Gerald to be a part of the group, I had no idea who he was. I'd never heard of Father Thomas Keating, had no idea what he had been up to. So I feverishly took notes, and I called Gerald up in Montana, told him that he was being invited to a meeting at St. Benedict's Monastery in October of 1984, and it was only about 2 months away. And he said, "Roger, I'm not going unless you go." And I said, "Well, Gerald, I'm not being invited." He said, "No, but you have to be there." I said, "He's not going to like it. He's not going to be happy about this." And so he said, "Well, you tell him you're my helper, and I'm not going to go unless you go." So of course I called Thomas, and I could tell by the tone of his voice he was not happy. So I went to the first meeting as an observer, and an observer was supposed to just sit and listen and observe, as the name implies. But over the 3 or 4 days that we were there, we were meeting in the monastery, we were having our meals in the monastery, and we're talking about 20 to 25 people, of which there were other people there that were observing that basically funded the meeting, but there were 15 to 16 representatives. So during the lunch and dinner and tea breaks, I got to converse with them. So when it came around to participating in the circle, it was hard for me to keep my mouth shut. So I raised my hand a couple of times, and Thomas tried to ignore me. And then some ribald person by the name of Rami Shapiro said, "No, I want to hear what Roger has to say." And then Douglas Steer. How any of you know who Douglas Steer was? A very prominent Quaker. Douglas Steer was there, and he spoke up, "Yes, I'd like to hear what Roger has to say." So that's how I became part of the group. And it was a few years later that Thomas came to me and he said, "Roger, I had no idea that when I was bringing together the major traditions of the world that I was leaving out the oldest tradition, which is no tradition." So I find it interesting, a person really of no tradition is the last man standing of the original group that started in 1984. So just to give you a little bit about this, as I said, the reason why Father Thomas Keating brought this group together is that when he would go to conferences, they had presenters, and the presenters met each other, and he found the most productive and interesting parts of the conference was when they were having dinner together, and they were having lunch together, and they were having coffee together, and the conversations that went on between the presenters he found very fascinating. But when the conference started, they were all presenting, and they didn't have an opportunity to really talk to one another. So his question was, what if I brought these people together? What would happen? I think that it would be very interesting. So that was the impetus of him bringing these people together. So in the first meeting that was at St. Benedict's Monastery in October of 1984, almost the first day and a half was they were discussing, do we videotape it? Do we tape record it? Do we make notes? And there were people for it, people against it, and then Gerald Redell spoke up, and he was a very quiet, unassuming person. And he said, you know, I don't think it's a good idea to record anything, because then if we record it, people are not going to feel free to say the things that they want to say. So in all of these years of our meetings, we never recorded anything. We never tape recorded, we never video recorded, and we made notes, I mean handwritten notes, but there was nothing really of a record of what we were doing. But what came of it, and from that first meeting, the topic was meditation, because what he wanted, the people he invited, they needed to come from the contemplative aspects of their tradition. So meditation was what they had in common. So that was the first topic that was discussed, and then it went from there. And over the years, we didn't know from one year to the next that we'd even meet again, because we're not an organization, we don't have funding, we don't have a staff to support us. We have people who came together, and because of our passion and our interest, we volunteered or took time out of our lives and the things that we were doing to come together on a yearly basis. And through those years, for the first few years, there were points of agreement that came to the surface, of which if you look in your program, that you'll see them. It's in the first page. And Father Tom was shocked that not only were there points of agreement, but there were several points of agreement. And you'll see the first one, the world religions bear witness to the experience of ultimate reality, to which they gave various names. Well, this ultimate reality didn't come about easily. There were big discussions over mystery or reality, and what is ultimate reality. Of course, the Buddhists were saying it's all knowable, and then there were others who were saying, no, it's a mystery, you'll never know it. So there was a lot of discussion, and it just wasn't simply, oh, we came up with this. There were a lot of back and forth about ultimate reality. But we decided, the Buddhists, the Tibetan Buddhists, decided they didn't have a problem with it. They had a problem with mystery, and that's what we came up with ultimate reality. Number 2, ultimate reality cannot be limited by any name or concept. 3, ultimate reality is the ground of infinite potentiality and actualization. 4, faith is opening, accepting, and responding to ultimate reality. Faith in this sense precedes every belief system. 5, the potential for human wholeness, or in other frames of reference, enlightenment, salvation, transcendence, transformation, blessedness is present in every human being. 6, ultimate reality may be experienced not only through religious practices, but also through nature, art, human relationships, and service to others. 7, as long as the human condition is experienced as separate from ultimate reality, it is subject to ignorance and illusion, weakness, and suffering. And 8, disciplined practice is essential to the spiritual life, yet spiritual attainment is not the result of one's own efforts, but the result of the experience of oneness with ultimate reality. Now, I can say it lists that those are points of agreement, but what I want you to know is what came of this, the real richness of our group came out of the points of disagreement. And I'll wrap it up really quickly. So this conference, one of the things that I want to pass on to you that came out of our Snowmass group, that became our mentoring group, was the development of intimacy. We went from the dialogue of representing the different religions to becoming friends and human beings who happen to be of a tradition, and from that place of deep friendship, we were able to really tackle and go into the deeper issues. And that took many, many years, and then that developed into the Snowmass InterSpiritual Dialogue, which is a mentoring program, which you'll see more of that later on. And this is Howard, Brahmaprana, who will come up and add to this.
I had the good fortune to attend one of the first mentoring processes, and it was such a wonderful experience because it was in a sacred space, and it was people from traditions who had had some level of experience, and so there was a power to their words and their stories, and it was not even so much what we shared in the circles. It was also what took place outside the circles. at the tables when we were talking or when we go off privately for a walk, and the kind of level of sharing that occurred. There were several things that I came away, more than several things, but the entire experience I had at Snowmass was one of what we call darshan. It's a word that doesn't really translate. It means seeing, but more than that, it means experiencing, and it goes into the heart. What stayed with me were some of the rituals I saw, Rabbi Howard's ritual, the Hasidic ritual of morning meditation, and how grounded in the earth and in the sun and in the elements it is. And it just brought back such a sense of sacredness of this old ancient tribal religion, so grounded. And in my tradition as well, the first form of God was called Vara, tree. And so reminders of going back to the source. Rogers, shaman, healing ceremonies, the one especially last June, so moving. We were moved to tears. There were aspects of nature that were responding to us, or so we felt. The wind would pick up just at the right moment, and the mockingbird would leave its feather. And there were so many signs that I received from such a ritual that I was not accustomed to. One of the most profound experiences, of course, Father Tom, the holiness that he generated, and kind of just oversaw the whole process. Just felt I was held in his personal stories that he shared, I took back with me and I shared with others. And one of the stories was Roger's story, which you're going to probably hear later, and another one from the Buddhist Tenzin Priyadarshi, when he was sharing a personal story, which is one of the most important parts of the dialogue. It was a story of a reality that he experienced in waking state, but it turned out that it was actually a dream. And he was as a boy, he was drawn to a festival into the village on a special festival day, and he saw a Swami there, and he saw people dancing, and he began to dance, with this Swami, and it lasted into the early hours of the morning, and then he went back to his sleeping quarters, and the next day he went out looking for that temple, and he asked, "Where is that temple?" And he knocked at the door where he thought the temple should be, and a sage answered and said, "No, there is no temple." And Tenzin, as a young boy, said, "Well, I met a holy man there, and he looked like this." And the sadhu came in and said, "Come in, we have some sadhus on the wall here. Is it this person? No. Is it this person? No. Is it this? Yes. Yes, I danced with him last night." And the man said he passed away many years ago. And Tenzin just realized that he had experienced a reality that was someone else's dream. And it moved me so deeply that I went back and delved into my own tradition, sleeping, dreaming, and dying, and whose dream are we really living?
I first came to Snowmass, to the Snowmass Monastery, which was an unlikely place for a good Jewish boy to end up. In 1965, I was helped found the Outward Bound School in Marble, Colorado, and as a part of our activity, I took a group of teachers to the monastery, and we lived and worked in silence with the Trappist monks for 2 weeks, and just from that there was a revelation that a connection to the mountains of Snowmass, Colorado, which I've been going to since I was 12 years old. That's a long time ago, and also to the fact that they were chanting the same psalms at 4:30 in the morning, which not my custom. But as we in Orthodox Judaism chant every morning also, so it was quite a revelation. And so anyway, I became involved with the Snowmass conference, and it was quite a process because the first thing that happened was I couldn't teach or discuss in a room with crucifixes, and I didn't know how I was going to tell them to take the crucifixes out of the room, because all the visions of the Inquisition and other events in history came back to me, and I spent a sleepless night, and then I told Roger, and he just took the crucifix out by himself, and it was kind of a conspiracy, but since then, both the fear and the tolerance and the graciousness of that moment kind of typified some of our interactions of how we come to agreement and to disagreement. And so over the years I've been a purveyor of my job. I do a lot of couples counseling, and I teach people how to fight fair. And so one of the things that in the discussions was Father Thomas would bring up the points of agreement, and I'd say, well, what are the points of disagreement, and how do we differentiate as well as come together in a universal commonality. And so I'm kind of the purveyor of paradox there. And one of the paradoxes of our organization is that we came to a point in upstate New York in a Vedanta retreat center there, where we were all calling it off. This was about 7 years ago. The whole group was dying, and we thought that was the end of it. And at that point, really was parallel to something we've all somewhat have in our spiritual disciplines, which is at the point of annihilation is really also the point of birth, because we all come from a small, infinitely small drop. And at that point, we switch from a kind of didactic, more didactic sharing of what we call the show and tell interfaith experience, which is everybody gets up and spouts their tradition, to more of a dynamic, spontaneous approach. And we started bringing in younger mentees to our mentoring process, and this was like a new birth or a transformation that we moved from the verge of annihilation to actually learning from that how to have more spontaneity in our conversations, which is a constant tension in groups and conferences like this. And as we did that, there was more of a heart-opening experience to that which connected us than we had before, when we were just sharing from our various positions. And this was quite a wonderful development, and since then we've been thriving on this new process, which is having representatives who are very schooled and rooted in their faiths to bring in new people who might have 3 or 4 different faiths at the same time, which is an anomaly. So at any rate, we have developed a process in my time there over 20 years, which is that we have learned to incorporate both all of our differences and celebrate our differences, as well as try to come to some points of commonality, and we hope to share more of that with you as we go along. Thank you.